And of course today, Dorothy, my mother, would have been 103 years old. And I remember, as you do so well, after her demise, the feeling that she had not yet left us. I had that feeling in the immediate aftermath, and of course in the outside chapel of rest, where the coffin was visited many times by us both. And she didn't seem to have gone. Neither did she before then, when she was in the hospital.
Definitely, when she was in the hospital, she hadn't gone.
She remained for a purpose.
She hadn't said goodbye to you, I don't think. And she definitely was still present. And I would say that by the time we saw her in the chapel of rest, she had gone. But definitely not in the hospital the night she died.
Well, when we visited in the evening, that many times as well, and we visited the little Gothic chapel in the rear, in the Garden of Rest, I suppose, of the Undertaker. And she seemed, even though she was there, she seemed perfect preservation.
Well, she was in perfect preservation, but that's different.
Yeah.
Her spirit was gone then, and that was apparent. But her spirit was still present when we saw her the night she died in the hospital. And I think, well, it was because she was waiting for you.
Yeah. No, I'd agree.
Yeah.
So there is sometimes, often not, but there is sometimes a lingering. And that lingering can result in unexplained phenomena. In her case, she stayed as though she were alive until such time as everything had been fulfilled in terms of goodbyes and viewings. So many.
I found it really interesting to see the difference. The only person I'd seen dead prior to that was my grandfather, and quite a few years before. I found it really interesting to see the difference between the time we saw her in the hospital, when she definitely was still there, and then the next time, which was perhaps a day or two later, when she was definitely gone in the chapel of rest. And it's fascinating.
Inasmuch as a spirit can linger discarnate, and this was more apparent when we witnessed somebody pass by our window of,
Oh, yeah.
of the front reception, or at the front of the house, whom I didn't know terribly well and never really spoke to, but he and his wife and his daughter belonged to a quite large house. I wouldn't say derelict, but in need of some attention. And we didn't have any idea he'd passed away, but we saw him many times wearing his cap, a sort of...
Except for one time when he passed by the window and he wasn't wearing his cap, and he came back and then passed by again and he was wearing it. And so obviously he went home to get his cap because he came out without it. But we found out later that he was already dead.
He'd been dead some little while.
So he lingered for several weeks. Oh! Excuse me. I saw him, you didn't see him. I saw him, they used to take their dog for a walk, and they used to jump in the car and take it to the nearest wooded area for a stroll. And I saw him getting into the car before the dog, in the back seat. And then his wife and daughter were in the front. And I mean, as perfectly as looking at you now, clear as day.
And he was absolutely confirmed long before then, but we didn't know, to have died.
Yes.
And
when I learned that he had died, I said to, it was his daughter, well, my mouth must have been open. I said, but I've been seeing him. And there you have it. Oh, I saw him on the high street, looking a little bit confused. He was on the corner of the high street, looking up and down. And, so not just one occasion we saw him going backwards and forwards past our window. I saw him in the high street, and I saw him trying to get into the car, jumping into the car because they were taking the dog for a walk. And all that time he had been dead, although we hadn't realised it. But of course, as soon as we had been told he was dead, we didn't see him again. But it was interesting. So he lingered, I don't know, about 3 weeks or so.
at least. He died, and we invited his wife and daughter to one or two dinner parties we were holding, particularly at the Christmases that followed. I can't remember how many, 2 or 3 Christmases afterwards. What do you say? 2. And though frail, his wife, very frail, his wife would sit at the table and alongside her daughter and whatever guests there were, and ourselves. And that was, I hope, a comfort for her, but she was completely so delicate that one wondered how long she would survive, and it was not long. It was not long, and
well, as is often the case, she had dementia, and the trauma, obviously, of losing her husband really triggered a progression, and she went downhill quite quickly.
But did we not see her? I felt I saw her on one or perhaps 2 occasions before I was told she was dead. I'm pretty sure of that. But anyhow, she went, and the daughter remained in this very large house which had a patio roof where magnificent views, and the daughter remains in touch, and didn't particularly appear astonished when we told her our experiences of her father. The house is technically up for sale and will need every bit as much work spent on it, perhaps more, perhaps a lot more than the house would be valued at. And understandably, because it is problematic in terms of its condition, there hasn't been a rush for anyone to buy it, but it is a classic looking haunted house. Most of the rooms remain unused. Houses of that size that aren't attended to frequently tend to fall into a certain degree of disrepair, and the problems of damp and cold beset them. But it is, in my view, a very haunted looking dwelling. Would you agree?
Yes, the shape of the house and its general sort of dilapidated state lends itself to imagining it could be haunted. And another few years it would be really creepy looking.
So do ghosts exist? We have to interpret what we mean by the word, and I don't mean Geist or the mind, I mean discarnate spirit. They can, I believe, I don't know how often, but they can linger once the corporeal body has expired. And we have experienced it personally. I have on numerous other occasions in the past, and cannot therefore dismiss.
I don't see why, if a spirit can linger and we have experienced it with our own eyes a few weeks, why they can't somewhat linger for years if they're not ready to go, or are, I don't know, have a purpose, traumatized or angry or vengeful or something, I don't know. If they can linger a few weeks, I don't see why they can't linger longer in that sense, although I've not experienced it myself. But I definitely have experienced the lingering and seeing, as clear as day, somebody who had been dead for several weeks. So in theory, I don't see why they can't linger for years and haunt a place. Although I'd like to think that people just sort of linger long enough to say their goodbyes if they're not quite ready to go, and then they move on.
Sometimes, of course, they need to be helped. Sometimes the trauma can be of such a kind that they have no release. And that might require some sort of ritual ceremony, even perhaps on very rare occasions an exorcism. But there is definitely life after death, no question whatsoever.